child, lost in the fog, and I'm frightened of meeting all you known unknown.
Hello and welcome to Poly Risk Reward. My name's Ned Stranger, and in 2024, my wife and I received the results of a DNA paternity test that showed that I'm not our daughter's biological father. Through these podcasts, I tell the story of our open marriage and this unexpected twist in forensic detail, with each episode focusing on a common question I get about open marriage, polyamory, and this unusual situation. Very excitingly, today is our first conversation-based podcast with a guest on the show. And as it's the first one, I thought it would be fun to explore the topic of first dates. So for this, I've invited Franziska Singer, who is an actor and podcaster, and she hosts one of Austria's most popular true crime podcasts, Darf, sein, but also, more relevantly for us, an amazing podcast called LiebesGeschichte, which explores the history of love and sex through lots of different themes. So it's a real honour to have her here, and I bring you our conversation now. We first met on a first date. Do you want to tell me your recollections of this meeting?
Do I have any? There was wine involved. Well, I had met you before, but you hadn't met me before that. Should I tell the story?
I think you should tell the story.
I saw you on stage at the Wiener Volkstheater, performing at the True Story Night. And you told a story about your wife and polyamory, and I thought, oh, okay, this is a person who gets it. Because so many men on the dating apps were saying, oh, I'm doing E&M, so ethical non-monogamy. But I didn't really trust them from the pictures and from what they wrote alone. And also I'd met men who claimed to be doing that, and it was never great. So I knew their girlfriends, and it was never that ethical. Or they didn't want their girlfriends to also go out and have sex or have a lover. So they only wanted it for themselves. But then I heard what you said, and it sounded like you understood, and you were, quote unquote, one of the good ones. And then I saw you on the dating app, and I thought, yeah, why not? Let's see. And then we met.
First of all, I'm honoured that you say that. It's basically an advert for the podcast itself. But when you said you didn't feel like other men that you saw on the apps were doing it well at all, you mean they were non-monogamous, but there was too much tension or jealousy, or they were actually actively lying about it?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of signals would you see on someone's profile that would make you think that, or was this only after you started talking to them?
It was mostly after we started talking, but sometimes something that they were writing in their profile just showed me that I didn't quite believe them. I can't recall because this is 3 years ago now.
This was 3 years ago,
Yes.
yeah. When you're going into a first date, how different is the experience for you if you're meeting somebody who's non-monogamous? Let's say that you haven't had any red flags and there's nothing obviously immediately wrong with them when you meet them. Does it drastically change the experience that they're non-monogamous compared to the rest of the time?
No, I don't think so. It just depends on what I'm looking for. So, but by the time we meet, this question has already been answered for myself.
So you generally go into a first date with a goal in mind, or at least a general goal?
I mean, what I'm looking for is a partner. So now I wouldn't want to meet anyone who claims to be or is actually ethically non-monogamous, because I don't want to play second fiddle in anyone's, like, in my partner's life. But if I'm just looking for something fun and casual, and that's the same thing that they are looking for, sure, that's fine. Then we're on the same, how do you say that?
On the same wavelength, I think you could say.
Then we're on the same wavelength.
So these podcasts are not specifically all about non-monogamy. I really want it to be exploring the underlying values, but in any relationship context. So with that in mind, if we're now thinking about solely monogamous first dates. So you're meeting somebody who's not in a relationship with a wife, for example. What would you say was the most surprised you've been on a first date? And it can be positively or negatively, up to you.
A guy who didn't really look like his pictures. That's always surprising. But I had one first date. We met in the street and he persuaded me to go on a date with him. So he gave me his phone number and said, well, just please contact me. I would love to take you out on a date. And so I did. I texted him and we went out. And we went to Museumsquartier here in Vienna in the summer. And I said, so we met and said hello. And then he said, oh no, I forgot. He had this expensive, like something like a skateboard, but like an electrical skateboard. I don't know. I'm sure they have names. Oh no, I forgot to like lock it. So I sat down and he went away and he said, oh, be right back, 2 minutes. And I ordered something and he didn't come back. And I ordered a bowl of nachos and the wind just took them out of the bowl and scattered them on the pavement. Wow. And I was sitting there laughing like a mad woman, watching the nachos scatter in the wind. And it was quite something.
And you never heard from him again?
I tried to call him, and he didn't answer his phone. And then I think the next day, or maybe 2 days after, he contacted me and said he's so sorry, but he was held up by the police. Police took him in because he had been crossing the street at a red light.
Wow.
Like, why did you need to cross the street?
I thought he was just locking up his thing.
Yeah, I don't know. So he said he's so sorry. And he'd also forgot his phone at a friend's house. And he was only now able to get it back. Yeah, red flags all over. Did I meet him again? I did, because I was young and dumb.
And because this guy he's either a total cad, in which case very interesting, or genuinely he realized that there was a woman or a child or man who needed help across the street, and so he ran across, and then the police, and then something, and this could have been like one of those films where just a series of unfortunate events happens. But so you did meet him again.
I think he was just a fucking liar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was stupid. I met him again because he was quite handsome. But then he said some more stupid things, and I didn't want to meet him after that.
I see.
Yeah, I just needed confirmation.
Fair. I mean, actually, that's quite a nice segue onto this general idea of first impressions. So often with first dates, you're actually seeing someone in person for the first time and possibly even hearing their voice for the first time, because if you've met them through a dating app and haven't voice called.
But you already have an impression in your head or an idea of how they're going to be. So the longer you text with someone, the more you just make up a person who probably doesn't even exist. Don't you think?
I do. I definitely do. I have a very wild imagination, which is why I've always tried to write fiction novels. Yeah. But do you feel, with this guy, for example, you had met him in person in the street, and he'd even signaled quite a lot by asking you out on a date there. Do you feel like the experience is very different if it's a absolutely first time meeting and you've built up an image of them but you've not met them before, versus seeing somebody at a party or on stage at the Volkstheater?
Yeah, I think it's quite different, of course. When you've met in real life before, you didn't only see the 3 or 4 best pictures the person has taken 5 years ago. You know what they look like, what they sound like at this moment in time. So I think that's an advantage.
Yeah, so on this idea of first impressions, and I was doing a little bit of research about this, there was, I think, a study done in 2016 at the universities of Stanford and Santa Barbara, and they basically just got a giant speed dating hall of speed daters going. So they could analyze all of them, and they set microphones on them and then analyze different patterns of speech, and they were sort of assessing what people thought was a successful date, like when they felt like they were clicking or not. And generally this idea of, especially I think when a woman was saying qualifying phrases or hedging phrases, I think they call it. So like, I kinda this, or sort of this, or maybe this, probably this, rather than just decisive speaking. So there were these different triggers for people thinking, oh, this isn't clicking very well. But how conscious are you on first dates of how it's going? And do you have any like red flags where you're like, I know this is going badly?
Ooh, what a question. I believe sometimes I think it's going better than it actually is. Because the last date I had, or at least I think it might have been a date, I was quite happy, but then he ghosted me, so...
I see.
What I found out this past year especially is that men on dates like to talk about all their big feats. Oh, I have this car and I own this many apartments. And
I do like to talk about my Maserati on my first date.
Yeah. And I've climbed Mount Everest in the buff and stuff like that. But I'm not interested in that. So if you're trying to impress me, that's going wrong.
So what are you looking for, Shania Twain?
I want to be asked questions. So most men that I've dated this year have been wanting to only tell about their own greatness and not know about anything personal. Maybe they ask about the same things they're talking about themselves. Maybe they ask about how big my apartment is, or
how many cars?
Yes.
How many times you've climbed Mount Everest?
How much money do you make doing what you do? But wouldn't it be more interesting to know something personal?
There's a lot of like, what's the word? Data gathering. You know, how much does this person earn? Or, you know, it's almost too directly, what prospects do I have with this person in a relationship, rather than this more holistic personality, philosophical stuff.
Why don't we want to gather data about how many siblings do I have? Where would I like to go in the world on a holiday? Because that's the things that I'm interested in. I don't care how much money you make. Yeah, we can talk about that later. But on the first date, really?
So I think about this idea a lot, as you know, about questions and the difference between boring, predictable questions and really, really deep questions.
You do ask some weird questions.
I like to, yeah.
I mean, it's positive.
But it's deliberately, or not deliberately organic. That doesn't make sense. It's organic. I don't want it to be seeming deliberately, I'm trying to be esoteric with my weird questions. That said, do you ever feel like you're being interrogated on a first date? And does that put you off?
No, I don't, because men haven't really asked me any questions aside from business-related questions. So yeah, I've felt interrogated about my work, about money things, but not personal ever, I think.
So in this 2015 study, there was actually very little overlap. So it was a heterosexual dating experience. They were analysing dates between men and women, and there were very, very few overlaps actually in what men thought was good and clicking versus what women thought. But one of the big overlaps was, like I mentioned, this idea of hedging phrases was a negative thing. So if a woman was being a bit cautious or hesitant, versus on the positive side, when women were using the words I and me a lot and talking about themselves, that signaled to the men that the date was going well, but also to the women. So this perspective of, you know, women being encouraged to talk about themselves was good for both sides, which I think is quite interesting as a finding.
Because I would think if you use words like, what did you call it? Hedging phrases?
Yeah. Like hedging your bets. You know, maybe I love you, but maybe I don't.
I'm learning so much English today. I would have thought that when women use that men like it because it makes them smaller in a way. And by stating, oh, I do this, I am very able of whatever I do, and not saying, oh, I kind of like maybe doing this, I would think that men get scared off by women clearly stating whatever she can do.
But I think also there's a difference between when a woman, for example, in that situation is talking about her feelings for the date, then it's obvious that you would want some element of confidence, because if you say, maybe we can go for a second date, that doesn't sound very confident, and that's not good. So I think it possibly depends on the context. I'm not sure if this is true. I'm theorizing that maybe decisiveness makes the man feel like the woman is comfortable enough to be clear in her mind, and therefore that's a signal to him that it's going well, possibly. So I'm not entirely sure. But it's an interesting study. I will put the link to the study in the show notes of the episode so that people can analyze for themselves. There was actually another quite fun study that I just picked out a detail from it that I thought was interesting. So it was similar, but how men and women analyze the prospects of a second date, or where they thought the relationship was going. And one of the negative signs, i.e. this is going badly, was when, for a woman, was when a man shakes her hand at the end of the date rather than kissing. Have you ever had someone shake your hand at the end of a date? First date?
No.
That's a real shame.
No, but men have not sent me any signals that they actually see this as a date and then surprise me by trying to kiss me. So I think sending a little signal like touching your arm or your hand is very nice. And you shouldn't just go for the kiss. Like, our first skin-on-skin contact cannot be our lips touching. So I've met up with guys and didn't think that this was going well, or sometimes didn't think that was a date at all.
Which I'm going to ask about as well. Yeah.
And then when we said our goodbyes, I was going for a hug because I like to hug people, and not a handshake. And they were going in for a kiss. And then I had to say, oh no, what? Where's this coming from? Do you kiss someone before ever touching their hand?
I'm sure there have been occasions where I've done that. And I would say I'm not a very touchy person. And part of that is worrying about intruding on someone's personal space. But then there are times when I know that it's obvious because they're touching me, for example, and I'm still not very touchy. But I maybe sense that the energy is really good. And so I would ask, and I do think that you're right. There should be some element of conditioning, like physical touch, to get to the stage of kissing. But also, even if I were kissing somebody, I would touch them on the way to kissing them. I wouldn't just press my lips against them. I would,
But that's what happened to me.
Press the body close to them.
Yes, exactly. Like, read the room.
So you mentioned this idea of not even realizing it was a date in the first place. And this is something I wanted to ask, actually, is...
I mean, to me, it was just, I knew this guy and we met for a coffee.
And then he was like, Actually,
I want to make out now.
Yeah. I thought this was obvious. But
well, not to me.
Does it make a big difference to you knowing whether or not something is a date before it starts? Or because obviously you can save that with the right... And you might meet somebody with the intention of it being very platonic, and then it evolves because you're suddenly really attracted to them because the questions are so good or something. Yeah,
but then there has to be some kind of chemistry. And you can't just meet and have a nice chat and then expect me to make out with you.
Unless it's can you trial my new kissing technique that I want to test on somebody?
Yeah, or you know what? Ask. And instead of just going in for it, yeah, that would be nice. By the way, do you like it when someone asks you, hey, can I kiss you?
It has happened to me twice ever.
And did you like it? Or did you
I
think,
did.
Why would you ask? Just do it.
I really like it. Do you think it's romantic and respectful and clarity or signaling intentions so clearly is a good thing? Or do you think it breaks the flow? And as some people have said to me, I think you should just know. If you want to kiss me and I want to kiss you, then it should be obvious. There should be no contract beforehand of, yes, I would like you to kiss me. So I don't know what you think about that.
I brought this up because I was talking to a woman who's probably in her mid-50s, and she said that she doesn't like it when someone asks, hey, can I hug you? Because of course, or hey, I would like to kiss you. Yeah, just do it. But I think it's nice to be asked. It depends on how well we know each other And it always depends also on the situation we're in. But I think asking is just, it's very nice. And it's a kind thing to do. And if the other person says no, you give them the opportunity to actually say no. And if you just do it, they might not want it. They might be sad and not want any touch in that moment. And then you make them even sadder by hugging them too hard.
The old handshake. Oh, my broken hand bones.
Or if these guys had asked me, I wouldn't have been so surprised and hurt their feelings by pushing them away and yelling no 5 times in a row. No.
Oh dear. I suppose it's a hindsight game as well. Like, it's so much easier to assess that in hindsight. And I have to say, overwhelmingly, I would only ask if I'm pretty sure that the answer would be a yes anyway. It's just a sort of smoother transition than... It really depends on even the geographical... Not geographical in the sense of which district in Vienna, but where you're sitting. For example, if you're sitting on 2 seats that are slightly awkward to like lean over, or the table is really big, then sometimes you can't make a move without it being awkwardly slow and long and just weird. So sometimes it almost makes sense to talk about it, and then there's a bit more.
I think it can be super sexy.
I actually have a story about the asking where, so I asked somebody, I really wasn't sure, there was energy there, but I wasn't sure. And I think what had happened is either I was sitting on one side of the table, she was sitting across from me, and then she moved around to my side of the table and I took that as a sign that she wanted to be closer to me, or I moved around to her side of the table when I can't remember basically, there was some moving involved. It was like musical chairs. And I asked her, and then it really just did not go well. And I think this was one of the only people I've ever met via Tinder, actually. So I've never really used Tinder as an app. They will not be sponsoring this podcast. This was one of the few occasions where I met somebody via Tinder. And she was really nice, and it was a really nice date. But she sort of said, I don't know how to answer that question. I have about 50 different possible responses in my head. And then it just kind of spiraled really awkwardly. And then I tried to avoid this by... And I think she just ordered a glass of wine as well. So it was like you're locked into whatever the next half an hour is or whatever. And so I got out of this by saying, I will go to the bathroom and we can just pretend this didn't happen. It was that awkward.
Asked, hey...
I was like, how would you feel if I kissed you? She was like, I don't know. And then I think what ended up happening is I went to the bathroom, came back feeling a bit embarrassed, but also fine. And we talked about something else. And then I sort of assumed that we would go our separate ways, and that was fine. And then we ended up having an 1.5 hour walk around the outer districts of Vienna, talking. And during that walk, I made a move without asking, and she did kiss me. And the whole thing just really confused me. And I think it was that problem. It's awkward to be asked because it should be obvious, but because you asked, it then made it not obvious. I don't know. I still don't really understand what happened there. It was a strange...
Neither do I.
It was a strange night. All I remember is there was a full moon and it was very beautiful.
Okay.
And yeah, I was wearing shoes that were not designed for a very, very long hike, and they destroyed my feet. Those are the things I remember from that.
Well, isn't that the most important thing?
That is. Always wear the right footwear. That is my number one advice for dates.
I mean, I don't know how it was growing up in England, but growing up in Austria, we never talked about consent. That's a really new thing. I mean, it's been for close to 10 years now. It really came up only after the Me Too movement. I was never asked, do you want this? I did a lot of things that I didn't really want to because no one ever has showed me that it's okay to stop and think about it or just say no. And I talked to my friends and they all say the same. We didn't know that we could actually say no and that it would be accepted. And one time I had a lover, and I think the first time that we were in bed together, I thought, you know what? Let me try that. Let me try asking, because completely new concept at the ripe age of 30 plus. So I said, hey, can I do whatever? And he said, yes. And you know what? It's so nice because no one's ever asked me anything. What was the best first date you've been on?
Accepting people who are current guests on the show, friends of the podcast.
Friends of the pod.
I've been on a lot of very memorable first dates, actually, especially since moving here. So I could probably do a whole other episode just telling stories. But so there were some fun moments. There was one where it was a karaoke first date. So we were talking on the app, and then she said, "Do you like singing?" And I was like, "Yeah, a little bit." And I think the only reason she invited me home was it was the only way to stop me from adding another song to the queue and doing another Michael Jackson cover.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fun for me. I mean, the first date I had with Anya was actually very memorable. We met very briefly, talked online for 4.5 weeks. Then we had our first date, and that was a picnic in a park in East London. And I remember really specific details. For example, she was walking to the date, and I saw her from a distance wearing this black dress, and I was remembering that's the person that I saw. I haven't misremembered it. It's a total stranger. And she stopped to talk to some guys who were sitting on a bench. And then when she came to sit down, she asked me if I could guess what she was talking to them about, which I thought was a really interesting curveball question. And they were asking her about the camera lens that was attached to her phone. She had one of these lenses that you add so you can take really cool pictures. And that was really nice. So she invited me back to her place, which was quite close, and cooked dinner, which is already a signal. But I still, honestly, this would have been about 5 hours into the date. And I think she was even quite touchy with me. And she did everything in her power to signal that I should kiss her. It took me 2 hours of sitting outside in her little garden area that she shared with her flatmates to finally make a move. And the reason it was super bad, I was trying to almost work up the courage. I didn't want to ruin what could be a beautiful friendship by lunging in, but I also hadn't learned the art of just asking.
Yeah.
And every time I would build up the courage, her flatmate would come outside to have a cigarette, and he would sit there for 10 minutes smoking a cigarette. Obviously, the conspiracy in my head was he's like deliberately torpedoing it. And then he would leave. I would build up the courage again, kind of resenting him and his existence. And then it took 4 cigarettes for me to eventually just give up. And he left, and I was like, right, I'm just going for it. And I kissed her, and the rest is history. But it was that was a memorable one. And I have to say that because, we're married now.
Well, one first date that I had, that was really great. We met on a dating app, and then we met up in real life. And we both didn't really want to go on that day, but we showed up and we had this instant connection and had a lot of fun. And later we met with a friend. Well, we wanted to meet with more of my friends, but everyone else just didn't show up. So then it was the 3 of us. And we had the best time. And afterwards, she said that was the best date she'd ever been on. And it wasn't even her date. Unfortunately, he was also a piece of shit, as it turned out. But it was a great date.
And that's the thing is, sometimes there's a difference between a good first date and a good entire relationship. So you can almost separate the two. And be like, that was very beautiful. I've had very, very amazing connections, conversations with people, and we've kissed and it's been really amazing. And then 3 days later, they've written and said, actually, I've thought about this and how I'm feeling, and I actually don't want this to go any further, which obviously is totally fine, but also a huge disappointment because you've had this beautiful first date and it's you have this energy from it, and then it sort of comes crashing down. Obviously totally fine. And I think then I realize you can separate the where it goes in the future from the date itself, and this idea of not having to rewrite the past just because the present has been reframed. So I can still look fondly back on the date, even though it ultimately ended in my crushing rejection via text.
But do you catch yourself analyzing what's going on in the moment?
I do a lot.
So like the amount of touching or something like that. I know you're not so much the touchy guy, but...
No, but I will notice when people touch me and it will signal to me that they feel at least comfortable enough to be in the same sphere of...
I now do that on purpose, that I will touch a man's arm and just see, does he pull his arm back? Does he then muster up the courage? Or muster up the courage to touch my arm? So when someone doesn't, then it was probably not a good date.
It's one of the 5 stages of courting that Helen Fisher talks about in her book, The Anatomy of Love. This idea of, so you're in the same vicinity and you're signaling that you're interested in mating in very evolutionary terms or whatever.
Mating, yeah.
And so you're doing certain movements and swaggering or laughing or loud sounds or clicking your heels. And then there's this phase where you're approaching each other and then you start initiating talking. And then this idea of the first touch and the beginnings of touch, like we said, is really important. And it is a huge signal if you stroke somebody's arm or even put your arm close to somebody and they flinch and pull away.
If you don't want to be touched by me, then this won't go anywhere.
Another big part, I think it's the third phase, is the talking phase. And apparently this works more in when you're picking somebody up in a bar, but I imagine if you have a first date through a dating app where you've never spoken to them before, you haven't had voice notes, this moment where you hear their voice for the first time. Apparently the 3, according to one of the studies that she discusses in the book, the 3 most significant factors are their grammar, that signals a lot about who they are as a person, apparently, their self-confidence, which you get from how they speak, and their teeth, which obviously is a signal for their age and health and stuff. So you get this, and I'm just curious, all their money, it's just gold teeth, yeah. But how big is it for you? Because you're obviously a professional podcaster, so voice is very much your medium. Same for me as a singer and now podcaster. Now a successful podcaster, sponsored not by Tinder. How big a moment do you feel that is for you? Do you notice voice? Are you very sensitive to voice when you hear it for the first time?
I guess so. So if someone tries to make their voice sound deeper, I will notice.
Would you notice? Do people do that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes women go in the other direction. I mean, yeah, women can go down and up, of course. So I used to know a woman who tried to make herself sound, less fragile. Just
more robust.
Yes, more robust. And a bit more manly by deepening her voice. But many women go in the other direction and do something a bit more childlike.
I mean, I have always wondered what it would be like if I spent the entire first date speaking like this, and obviously they've never
doing
met
a bad
me before.
man.
Yeah, but I think it gets very tiring very quickly, and it's hard to inflect the same way. You just sound like everything you say is very emotional, which is perhaps too much.
But if I notice that something like that's going on, I can't help but wonder what else he's trying to change about himself.
Would you not just ask, are you deliberately making your voice sound lower?
No.
Because I really appreciate the effort, but you don't have to do that. I will accept whatever your voice sounds like.
I mean, I would prefer the real voice, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Franziska, for making the time in your busy podcasting schedule to talk to me. It's been really fun. This is the first conversation that we've had on Poly Risk Reward, so it's very pertinent that it's about first dates.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you have a funny first date story of your own that you would like anonymously read out on a future episode, please send it in. And remember to leave us a little review or a rating.
5 stars.
5 stars. Even if you hate the podcast and you write terrible things, 5 stars.
5 stars.
Keep the rating average. Yeah. And thank you again for listening. My name's Ned. This has been Franziska and Ned on Poly Risk Reward.
You're not growing up, you're just growing old, waiting for the fight to unfold. And now underneath the buildings bear their many teeth, and steel and glass and false belief rising up and leaving you behind.